Action.
Hello, today we're going to be presenting our presentation on the Second Red Scare. So, right after World War II, tensions between the United States and the Soviet Union were growing, and as a result, in 1947, the Cold War began. Throughout the Cold War, the Soviet Union had various strong connections to communism. In fact, in 1948, the Soviet Union put into place various communist-based governments in Eastern Europe. Fearing the spread of communism worldwide, America kept close attention. So it was in the late 1940s and early 50s, and America was entangled in the Second Red Scare, a period in which heightened fear of communists led to the unlawful persecution of thousands of federal employees, celebrities, actors, writers, producers, artists, and academics by the U.S. government. In 1946, Martin Dies Jr., the chairman of the House Un-American Activities Committee, also known as HUAC, came out stating that they had accumulated a list of 42 names of whom they believed were communists. Along with the statements, the organization said that the names would only be cleared if they stood in front of a jury. From the list of 42, a total of 19 individuals cited their First Amendment rights to freedom of speech and refused to give evidence, while another 12 refused to appear for the committee. Then, out of the final 11 supposed communists, only Bertolt Brecht agreed to testify. The remaining 10 were ultimately labeled the Hollywood 10. By the late 1950s, the Red Scare subsided, but the damage done to some of the accused was irreversible, and a dark period would remain in the conscience of American politicians for years to come. The foundation of the Second Red Scare was laid during the First Red Scare of 1919 and 1920. Near the end of World War I, in November 1917, Lenin held his Bolshevik Party to overthrow the Russian Empire, establishing a communist Soviet Union. Not long after Lenin's successful revolution in 1919, a smaller group of American radicals found the Communist Labor Party. In response to concerns of social influence, Alexander Mitchell Palmer, Attorney General under President Woodrow Wilson, took it into his own hands to quell what he saw as a security threat to the United States. During his term, Palmer deported a total of 249 Russian immigrants from the U.S. without justification. In addition, he established the General Intelligence Unit in 1919. This unit, which would one day be led by John Edgar Hoover, would execute his raids throughout 1919 and 1920. One of Palmer's most controversial raids occurred in January of 1920, when federal agents invaded the homes of suspected communists without search warrants and detained 5,000 citizens, completely ignoring their legal rights. Luckily, by the summer of 1920, Americans began to reject Palmer's illegal tactics, and the First Red Scare came to an end. Nevertheless, an element of anti-communist hysteria remained in the minds of the American people, as reflected by the Sacco-Vanzetti case. On April 15, 1921, 2 workers at a shoe warehouse in Massachusetts were murdered. Officials arrested 2 Italian immigrants, Nicola Sacco and Bartolomeo Vanzetti, as suspects. Although the 2 immigrants claimed innocence, they were convicted, likely due to their anarchist and socialist ties. Despite protests, Sacco and Vanzetti received the death sentence on August 23, 1927. The Sacco-Vanzetti case proved that anti-communist hysteria had not completely subsided by the 1930s.
The lead-up, the Cold War. The lead-up to the Second Red Scare also took place as the US and the USSR began their Cold War rivalry. As a result, a fear of left-wing sympathizers and of the possible resulting security threat spread through the American public. This fear had some merit. During World War II, there had been Soviet spies and American sympathizers. In addition, the US was observing a surge in communism around the globe. In 1949, for example, the USSR completed its first successful nuclear bomb test. Mao Zedong also successfully executed a communist takeover of China. And in 1950, the communist-backed North Korea invaded South Korea, beginning the Korean War. However, in the following months, the supposed danger posed by spies and sympathizers would be completely blown out of proportion by a number of anti-communist politicians. Next, we'll be talking about the HUAC. What is this thing? The first step the federal government took to advance the Red Scare was the establishment of the Special House Un-American Activities Committee in 1938. The Special House Un-American Activities Committee would grow into the House Un-American Activities Committee, the HUAC or HUAC, in 1945. The HUAC primarily targeted federal workers and celebrities of Hollywood. One famous accusation involved the Hollywood 10, a group of 10 individuals who refused to testify regarding their communist ties, claiming that the inquiry violated their rights. In the end, the 10 were not convicted, but they were still fined $1,000 each, and their families' reputations were tarnished. In addition, the HUAC's activities had an influence on movie producers themselves. Producers began to blacklist suspected communists for fear of backlash from the federal government. Groups such as the Committee for the First Amendment and the Motion Pictures Alliance for the Preservation of American Ideals were formed to vocally reject communism in Hollywood. In fact, these blacklists were not unique to Hollywood. They existed in many other fields, such as industry and academia. Next, we'll be talking about Joseph McCarthy, one of the central figures in the Red Scare. Senator Joseph McCarthy of Wisconsin was a key figure in the Red Scare. He used exaggerated rumors and fear-mongering to terrorize those who he distrusted, as well as those who disagreed with his political policies. McCarthy claimed that Roosevelt and Truman administrations were 20 years of treason, and throughout his career, his accusations would primarily negatively impact the Democratic Party. McCarthy often made vastly exaggerated claims about the severity of communist influences in the United States. For instance, he famously claimed in 1950 that thousands of communists had infiltrated the State Department. McCarthy offered no evidence to substantiate his claims, only revealing that the sinologist Owen Lattimore was on his list. However, in fact, Lattimore would never serve in the State Department, and was never convicted of a crime. McCarthy was ultimately denounced in 1954 when he decided to investigate the Eisenhower administration and the army for potential communists. Eisenhower, as a result, issued a censure on McCarthy, essentially ending his reign as well as the Red Scare. However, McCarthy's name lives on as a reflection of his disgraceful tactics during the Red Scare. And today, the term McCarthyism refers to the act of conjuring up unfounded claims to soil the reputation of one's opponent. I'll be passing it over to Patrick, who will be discussing J. Edgar Hoover to begin.
Another central figure to the Red Scare was John Edgar Hoover, the director of the FBI. As noted above, Hoover had presided over Attorney General Alexander Mitchell Palmer's raids of suspected anarchists during the first Red Scare of 1919 and 1920. During the 1940s and 1950s, Hoover investigated and collected files on suspected communists. Hoover used surveillance and wiretaps to monitor suspected individuals. Just as McCarthy did, Hoover heavily exaggerated his findings to the American public. Regardless, the FBI's information was used in court, and for example, was used in a case such as the 1949 imprisonment of 12 leaders of American Communist Party, as well as the 1951 downfall of the spies Ethel and Julius Rosenberg. Under Hoover, the FBI also encouraged individuals to expose suspected communists. They even asked people to come out and just call out names if they had any links. And to boot, even famous celebrities were beginning to name communists left and right. And so President Harry Truman also passed anti-communist legislation early in the Red Scare due to pressure from right-wing individuals. These conservative activists claimed the administration contained communists. His Executive Order 9835, also known as the Loyalty Order, was passed on March 21st, 1947. It called for federal workers to be examined for their loyalty to the government. And the Loyalty Order led to the firing of hundreds of federal employees, as well as plentiful resignations. The order was of questionable constitutionality, but it was only the beginning of the hysteria. Even after Truman passed the Loyalty Act order and reinforced his anti-communist foreign policy, many viewed him as soft on communists. Though Truman did not run for re-election in 1952, and furthermore, the Republican challenger Dwight D. Eisenhower did not prevent fellow Republicans, including Vice Presidential nominee Richard Nixon, from branding Truman and other Democrats as weak on communism. Overall, the Red Scare destroyed thousands. So looking at the big picture, the outcomes of the Red Scare. So overall, the Red Scare destroyed thousands of lives, and thousands of lives over largely exaggerated accusations. And the blacklists that were established haunted the accused families as well. So anyone who wanted to go into the Hollywood business they'd have the disadvantage towards others. And in addition, the Red Scare also showed some politicians' willingness to compromise the Constitution over anti-communist fervor. And as the Red Scare progressed, it grew increasingly conservative, and out of fear, politicians failed to criticize the anti-communist tactics. Similarly, left-wing groups and outlets were quite silent, fearful of being branded as communists. And it also impacted the political climate greatly, and that can be seen through the court cases throughout the time, and more specifically in 1951, when the Supreme Court ruled in the Dennis versus the United States case, where they deemed it constitutional to restrict the free speech of communists, citing the clear and present danger doctrine.
So why are we talking about the Red Scare in the first place? Well, we actually see considerable relevance when it comes to the American political and social climate today. First of all, the Red Scare is directly related to the villainization of the word socialist. As rising seniors at BCA, the 2020 election will be the first election we will ever be able to vote in. It's finally time for our generation to start thinking about American politics and the future of the United States. Specifically, the growth of the alt-right movement in the Republican Party and the growth of the progressive movement in the Democratic Party. The progressive movement in the United States has been referred to by both its leaders and its opponents as socialists, and in some cases even as communists. This, in our opinion, is inaccurate, and it is important that BCA students actually understand this distinction before making political allegiances. It is important that BCA students and other upcoming Generation Z voters try to understand the actual policies of the American Progressive Movement before subscribing to the villainization of the movement by its opponents as socialists. In addition, we see a rising threat in fake news in today's society. Fake news is a growing threat to credibility in society. Without a set of facts that people can agree on, individuals will be able to make any claims without fear of repercussions, just as in McCarthyism. The four of us recognize this threat and realize that if we're not careful, we can actually contribute to the rise of fake news. Just by carelessly sharing a link on Facebook or a post on Twitter, a single person can increase the visibility of a given piece of fake news considerably. As a result, we pledge to be conscious of the credibility of the information we consume. This information is not limited to news, but includes professional articles, such as research reports. Professionals and scientists have a responsibility to protect science and industry from misinformation. We hope that our presentation can convey this view to others at BCA in order to protect the foundations of our democracy. Thank you for listening.